Gotcha! Look at my beautiful glowing skin in the sunlight coming through on this window. No. This is a review of the new Black Breath record, Slaves Beyond Death. Black Breath is a Seattle band on their third full-length album, and it's an LP I've been highly anticipating since the release of their second full-length album, Sentenced to Life, an album that I loved that year, one of my favorite metal records of that year. But Black Breath is not simply a metal band. They fuse together elements of crust and hardcore punk, thrash metal and death metal, a little bit of rock and roll too, with a buzzsaw guitar tone, a lot of D-beat drumming, some deadly riffs, and some very savage vocals too. Slightly one-dimensional, but Black Breath was certainly so good at doing what they were doing that I didn't really have that much of a problem listening to it for a whole record, which wasn't really that long of an album anyway. So I was kind of expecting another serving of that, as well as what Black Breath did on their first LP, but actually, surprisingly, the band changed it up significantly on this new album, which in a sense I think was a good move, because putting out another just kind of thrash, crash, and bash type album could have gotten old very quick. And on this new album, in a way, Black Breath kind of takes the subtle route with a lot of melodic, slower, easier guitar passages, a lot more soloing on here, and some kind of epic tension-building builds to bring us into the meat of these songs, which are kind of the same hard-hitting thrash and bash Black Breath that you've come to know. It's an 8-track album, and each song is pretty ambitiously structured. Not a single track on here is under 5 minutes. So on paper, I think this record is a really exciting and an interesting record for Black Breath, but I do kind of have an issue with what it actually is. And my issue is that I think a lot of these slower, more subtle parts, a lot of these builds, a lot of these more melodic guitar passages aren't really that exciting. Many of them are sort of generic. Not a single one I think is particularly amazing. Most of the time they are simply decent. The whole record starts off with a patience-testing introduction. However, once we get to the 140 mark of the track, the song actually starts kicking ass and getting exciting. I can appreciate that the band was going for something more dynamic and just a little more diverse, but they continually on this album let up on their incredible intensity, the incredible intensity that's on their debut record, on their sophomore record, only to kind of lean on these very average metal melodies. And this leads to a lot of tracks on this record becoming incredibly tedious, like the Chains of the Afterlife instrumental, which ends the whole album out, which I don't like at all, and the song Seed of Cain, which has a really filler intro. The introduction on the song Burning Hate doesn't really do that much for me either. I mean, the guitars are so loud and so blaring at this beginning portion of the song that by the time we get the harder and heavier portion of the song later, it doesn't even really feel like we've transitioned into anything significantly different. Everything is like the same volume. It's all still very heavy, hard, and aggressive. And then there are other cuts on here which are somehow a middle ground between these two sides of Black Breath on this record, like Arc of Violence, which isn't too soft, but it's not really that intense either. Kind of feels like a middle-of-the-road Black Breath. Though I do like the lyrics on this track, and a lot of the other tracks on here, they come off really bloodthirsty, with mentions of cold night winds and festering hunger, or the I drag your soul refrain on the title track of this album, which is one of the few tracks on here, one of the handful of tracks on here, I should say, that I actually like from beginning to end. There are some moments on this album where Black Breath does yield some good results. The very heavy and slow verses at the start of this title track are just as hard-hitting as the frenzied second half. And the track A Place of Insane Cruelty, the kind of start-stop riffs on here mixed with the very beautiful harmonized guitar solos on here, is actually just a good, I guess, contrast and a good mix of Black Breath's more melodic and more aggressive side on this record. And the song Reaping Flesh is easily the album's most no BS track and has a really great melodic bridge where, okay, that's a really appropriate place to kind of put that slower, just more pretty side of your record. It worked really well in that context, and the whole album, the whole track, rather, just kicked ass right from the start, glided us into this really tasteful bridge, and we were done. We were there. If there is one change on this record that I could definitely give props to, it is the vocals. The vocals do seem to change up a little bit on this album. They feel like they really have an extreme metal vibe to them as opposed to more of like a hardcore punk vibe as they did on many of the tracks from Black Breath's previous record. There were even some really ear-piercing shrieks, especially toward the beginning of the album, that seemed a little Vector-ish in a way. Overall, I thought it was a decent record. Black Breath tried something different. Sometimes it goes over well, sometimes it doesn't. I don't think it's anything they should necessarily give up on entirely, especially since there are a few spots on this album where this more melodic side of the band did sound great, but for the most part, it makes a lot of this record kind of a drag. I'm feeling a light to decent 6 on this thing. Tran? Black Breath. Zishin. What'd you think of this Black Breath record? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Were you freaking out over the riffs? Were you liking those slow, heavy parts? Were you digging the melodies? What's going on? What's going on here? Did you dig it? Did you hate it? Let me know. And what should I review next? Anthony Fantano, Black Breath, forever.